Welcome to Speculative Sandbox, your audio playground for creative storytellers. I'm Vickie Alan, and each episode, I and a guest will unpack a fictional trope with an eye for world building, character development, or narrative structures. If you like what you hear, please consider leaving a review on Apple Podcasts. You can also join the conversation on Instagram or TikTok. When the real world just doesn't cut it, let's get lost in a fictional one. Okay, Wendy, if you could turn any classical fiction novel into a spicy book, which would it be?
Oh my gosh, no wonder you didn't tell me the icebreaker in advance. This is hard. So that's unfair because my favorite classical literature is Great Expectations, and I feel like that already is like historical spice. Um, you could make it spicier. I feel like we
Okay.
could make like a great Sexpectations, and it would be amazing.
Oh, awesome. Okay. I was thinking about this too because I was like, what kind of a book would I want to see as a spicy book? And quite frankly, the first one that came to my mind, which is an odd pick, but I embrace the challenge, would be Little Women, just because it's about coming of age and entering relationships.
I mean, I could see that turning into like a reverse harem kind of thing. Like not in like a family way, but in like a, they're
Mhm.
empowering. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Little Women, let's go.
All right. Awesome. Well, everybody, welcome to another episode of Speculative Sandbox. I am so excited to have Wendy Dwan with me today. So, Wendy, can you please introduce yourself, tell your listeners all about you and what you do?
Nor, thank you so much for having me on your podcast, by the way. I am honored to be here. So I am an EMDR therapist. I have a background in community health, working with the chronically homeless. I have a background working in residential treatment centers. But for the last few years, I've been in a group private practice, and I primarily work with trauma, among many other conditions. Personally, I read a ridiculous amount of spicy novels. And I'm really excited to tie that into my professional expertise. And then fun facts about me, I do a lot of yoga. I have really cute babies, really cute dogs, and I love cats.
Amazing, amazing. And I feel like for those that are watching this on either YouTube or Spotify, we kind of planned how we were going to look today. And I naturally, when I thought of spicy books, I went for a romantic sunset, soft, and you are nice and dramatic and the choker and everything. So do you think this reflects our preferences in romance?
I think it does. I think it does. I like that we're both wearing sweaters. That's like comfortable reading attire, right? But like my black on black with the red nails and the choker, I definitely am more of a dark romance kind of gal. So
Mhm.
it is
Okay.
fitting. Yes.
All right. So, trigger warnings. Let's talk trigger warnings. So, just like spicy books, what should people be forewarned about this podcast episode?
Oh boy. First of all, I love a book with a good trigger warning page. That's like a I'm in if I see that. There's a lot of things that could get brought up. So bad words, first of all, sexual content, um, concerns about addiction, consent, assault, trauma. Um, some probably some weird tropes you haven't heard of before, things like shifters. I don't know. It depends how deep you consider a trigger to be. Maybe violence. I don't know. Yeah, there's those are kind of the potential warnings I could think of off the top of my head.
I'm more or less kind of curious to see how it is when we start saying some raw sexual words just out loud. That'll be first on this podcast. But I mean, words are power, right? Being able to speak words and acknowledge things. And so it's a healthy thing to do, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, so let's get started. For our listeners, can you tell us what are spicy books?
So that's a good question. I feel like it's a very broad genre because in general, it's books with some kind of sexual content, right? Spice can be the build up, spice can be the straight up like Den of Vipers kind of story where they're just like banging everywhere. Spice can be like a really exciting adventure with a little bit of romance sprinkled in, where there's like a little bit of Pound Town going on, but not much. Like I think spicy books is a very broad concept, but anything with uh a little bit of the tingles, a little bit of the excitement, you know? Yeah.
how would you classify the different levels of spice? I've heard like really spicy smut books versus little smut, a little spice. Is there like a formal way to look at this?
I really like the chili pepper, like out of five, the little emojis when you're looking at reviews. Because some will be like a 1 out of 5 spice. And to me, that's like a nice rom-com where there might be like a young adult kind of version of spice where there's a little bit of romance, maybe some like first
Mm.
base, second base, maybe some go like Twilight, right? Like Twilight, like they go all the way, but they don't really describe it, right? And then 5 out of 5 spice is like, I mean, there's like just page one, there is deep penetration, you know?
All right. So, if someone has picked up a pretty smutty book, they should know what they're getting into pretty quickly.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
But sometimes they escalate. Like, think of the ACOTAR series, right? Like, books 1 through 4 were like pretty mild spice. And then A Court of Silver Flames was like 6 out of 5 spice. And it was like, whoa, that escalated quickly.
Is
You
that the
know?
one with the sister?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. She got down. She got down.
I did not get that far. I think I got 3 books into the series during COVID and hasn't gotten past that. But maybe, is it worth it? Would you recommend that one?
It is. It's not my favorite one in the series, but it's definitely worth it to continue the series. Yes, but it definitely did not fit the vibe check of the rest of the series. No, like shade towards Sarah J. Maas. She is the queen of this genre, right? We love her. It was just, yeah, that book was like a totally different spice content than the rest of the series, for sure. So it's not always consistent.
It's been interesting because I would say 10 years ago, Twilight was really popular. And then, vampires, glittery vampires and sex that results in breaking the bed. And then after that, it was 50 Shades of Grey. And suddenly that was like the what do they call it? Like the housewife smut fiction or something like that. And then we just kept leaning into it, right? Like smut has really taken off and it's this huge market. Um, what do you think is going on here? Why is it so popular? Why do you love it so much? And what are some good examples of books that like everyone knows about?
I love that it's made a comeback. I mean, I remember when I was a kid, like my mom always had books with like Fabio on the cover, right? So like they've always been around, but I feel like the romance genre has changed and now it's definitely more fantasy than
Mm.
I actually have never read a book with Fabio on the cover. I really should to enhance my expertise. But I love that it's made a comeback. Clinically, as a therapist, I have many reasons why A, love reading and B, love reading spice. So just a little brief overview of EMDR. We don't need to get too deep into it, but a big component of EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. It's a trauma therapy. The biggest component of it is bilateral movement. So back and forth movement. That's what we use when we reprocess. When you are reading, your eyes are going back and forth and reprocessing. This activates a part of your brain that affects the bridge between your emotional brain and your logical brain, and it can be powerful and healing. It's very similar to when you're in REM sleep. It's things that we do organically in nature, like walking, running, hiking, biking, rocking a baby, elephants rocking back and forth in the zoo to self-soothe. There is a very organic self-soothing component to reading in general, right? As a trauma therapist, I work with a lot of people with sexual trauma. And so being able to dive into a sexual adventure while having some bilateral movement can be a really safe space to either desensitize them to the effects that it would normally have on them, or do more of a future template and get them excited about the potentials for sexual activity when before they would might have been in a space of like, I'm never having sex again. And then for me personally, I just had 2 kids back to back. And so getting into smut really helped me reconnect with my sexual side and feel sexy again. So there's just a lot of benefits clinically, therapeutically, personally. At this point, I might be reading too much. I'm trying to watch more TV. Um, but yeah, so did that answer the question? I
Yeah,
feel like, We went
Well,
off.
that's fascinating to me because I think some of the, and let's go into societal impressions. Some people might think that really, really spicy books, almost spicy books, could be further traumatizing. But the fact that it could actually be used to heal is great news.
And so it's not a one size fits all. Okay. So I'm not saying, hey, if you have sexual trauma and you are struggling, go pick up the spiciest book that you can find. This is a very personal journey that someone has to go on. It's not for everyone, just like every genre isn't for everyone. But with my clients, I do recommend to most of them to read smut, but they are in active therapy, they're reprocessing, they're in a healing stage. And so they have support throughout the process, right? People don't necessarily have to do therapy or EMDR to heal from trauma. A lot of people heal organically over time. But that's what a good thing about trigger warnings is and content
Yeah.
warnings. If you're looking at that page and you're feeling activated, maybe start with a lower spice level, because we don't want to flood yourself with those feelings if you're not in a supportive space.
Okay. That's really great advice. Thank you for sharing that with us and with me and our listeners. Okay, moving on to societal impressions. One debate I tend to see a lot is whether or not spicy or smut fiction qualifies as literature. What do you think of this argument?
I mean, that's just a hard yes. I mean, some of these authors are literary geniuses. I
Hmm.
don't see, I mean, okay, so there are some, like if you're on Kindle Unlimited, you'll see some like really short stories with some bizarre content that like, I mean, it's all literature. It really is. Literature is in the eye of the beholder, whether
Hmm.
it's spicy, whether it's just bizarre sexual content, it's all literature, right? It just
Hmm.
depends on how much depth it has.
Well, and also thinking like who is the one that is primarily consuming this type of content and to then put it in the discussion of whether or not it qualifies as literature feels inherently sexist.
Yeah, yeah, I
Okay.
agree.
Okay. All right. So then moving on to more societal impressions, I've been seeing a movement of anti-smut sentiments online, weighing high spice against cleaner romance, implying that spicy is bad while clean is pure. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I try to avoid black and white thinking. This is good. This is bad. I mean, there's a lot of gray, 50 shades of gray in the middle, right? No, I really feel like if it's not for you, it's not for you, and that's fine, but don't discount the benefits that it could have for other people that enjoy it.
Hmm.
I'm not a nonfiction reader, maybe because I did so much schooling and I had to read so much nonfiction to get my brain where it is today. I don't really read nonfiction for fun, but I totally respect other people that do. That doesn't mean that it's bad, you know, it's just not where I'm at this stage of my life right now. I love a good fantasy. I love a good romance. I love a good slow burn. You know, that's just, I don't
Hmm.
think there's any good or bad. If it's not for you, that's fine. But there are a lot of benefits to those of us that enjoy it.
Before I move on to some therapy specific questions, I'm curious, what are some of the most standout, interesting things that you've read?
Uh, like the things that I've read that are kind of like off the wall.
Yeah, that you would like maybe the average listener might not think is out there.
Okay. Well, okay, so let's just kind of like do like an overview of like the kind of genres and tropes, right? Because there's
Okay.
like the classic like enemies to lovers. I love a good slow burn. Like I want the main character to be beaver damned for like 3 books before they actually go to Pound Town. That's my favorite. I love the buildup, right?
Yeah.
But then there's also reverse harems, where if you don't know what that is, that's where a female protagonist has like 5 male lovers, and they're typically fated mates, and they just worship her and love her and go at it all at the same time. And it usually takes a while to get there. That's very empowering and amazing. There's also a lot of very violent romance out there. And there is a very not uncommon rape fantasy, right? And this doesn't necessarily mean that people want to be sexually assaulted in real life, but there can be something very compelling about a story about violent sex. So that is also a pretty common trope, where it's like they're being bullied and then it turns into something really sexy and they're like, hey, I really like this, right? And then there's a whole trope with inanimate objects. I happened upon one recently. It was hilarious. It was so funny. Oh my gosh. I do not remember the name of the author. I'll have to get back to you. But there was like a Furby that transformed into a giant sex toy in the middle of the night, and a rake that was a guy that was like cursed by witches and turned into a rake, and the girl had sex with the rake and they fell in love and it broke his curse and they lived happily ever after. I mean, there's just like, if you can imagine it, it's out there, right? And there's so many more that I haven't even covered. Shifter romance is a big one. There's some weird lines in there, like if they're like in their shifted form and the person's in human form, there's like nodding. I'm not into that, but like if you're into that, like cool. There's memes about that, right? Where like one day you're just reading ACOTAR and then the next day you know what nodding is. And it's like, well,
I don't know what that is, but do I want to know what that is?
it's I don't know how to explain it. It's like no, we should pass.
Okay, okay, people Google that. Okay. It's your responsibility to okay. All right. So then I feel what's so enlightening and kind of exposing about the human condition in reading these kinds of books. I feel like society's always trying to define our sexual rules, whether it's like religious rules or just cultures and customs. Um, what role does smut fiction play in kind of revealing who we are as humans?
That's a great question. And I don't really think it's like a very like one-to-one correlation, right? Like I'm in a monogamous relationship and I love my husband and have no desire to add extra partners to our relationship, but I love a good reverse harem story, right? But I don't think it's necessarily about having multiple partners for me. It's about being worshipped by all these men and these men not having jealousy and like sharing is caring, right? And for some people, I mean, there's definitely some very adventurous sex scenes where it's like, hey, I would love to try this with my partner. Or maybe there's like a lesbian scene in a book and someone's like, ooh, I'm down to try that, you know? So it could definitely expand someone's horizons, but I do think a lot of it is more symbolic, and more just entertainment.
Yeah. So, okay. So then when there are attempts to ban these kinds of books, do you think that's like how do you think that affects us as a society?
I mean, rude. Who's trying to ban these books? Like, this is America, freedom of speech. I mean, they're out there trying to ban like legit like literature, and that's like a whole other thing, right? But it's like freedom of choice, you know? Like, if you want
Mhm.
to read it, read it. If you don't, don't. Like, you know?
Yeah. Okay, so then as a therapist, and you kind of dived into this, but I'm going to read this question anyway. As a therapist, I imagine you hear a lot about sex. What are some truths you can share about sexual health in relation to what we see? So fantasies versus actual sex desires, consent, the like.
Okay, no, that's a good question. So, real humans obviously know details. One human I work with, a significant lifetime of sexual trauma, recently got into smut. This kind of individual was like, I'm never having sex again. They were just like, I'm going to be asexual for the rest of my life. But then getting into spicy fiction, really opened up a part of their brain that was really healing for them, where they were like, wow, this is exciting. I'm tapping into my sexuality. I wish that I would have explored this sooner. And it's activating healthy parts of their brain for them. Other individuals I've worked with, similar to my journey, being very postpartum, right? Feeling very uncomfortable in their own body, reading these books can really activate that part of your brain and part of your body where you're releasing those exciting hormones and feeling sexual, feeling sexy again. Also, it can be like exposure therapy for some if they have had a violent past, to slowly work their way into literature where there is some violence. That's not ideal for a lot of people, and some people with violent sexual trauma are not going to read violent sexual smut, and that is perfectly fine. But some of them are like, I want to get desensitized to this, and I want to dip my toe into the water and read it as a safe observer, and that can be healing for them as well.
In some cases, I've seen people debate or try to call out certain types of books and say that the events in such books are irresponsible, that they shouldn't be doing that. Shame on them. What's your thoughts on that?
Um, Pieces of it I can definitely understand, especially with Book Talk, right? Book Talk is an amazing community where people can connect and get recommendations, but then there are certain books that really get highlighted, right? They become very popular,
Mhm.
and a lot of lack of consent, stalking, some violations that occur in these books that get really popularized. So I do see it being possible that people can get the wrong idea and be like, oh, this is what people want. Right? But that's why it's always important to have that conversation about consent. One thing I do see more often than anything else, I feel like those kind of books are more of the outlier. In the majority of books I read, the person who's about to be penetrated, like they're like nodding their head in consent, and the person's like, I need to hear you say yes. And I'm like, yes, I love this. Like, it's not implied consent. They are giving verbal consent. And I feel like more books than not are really encouraging that kind of concept. But yes, I do see some books that can be especially inappropriate for kids. Oh,
Mhm.
that's like my biggest thing. I feel like there's people letting their children read books that are not appropriate for children. Um, so so yes and no.
Yeah, I think there's a movie that's currently coming out. Oh, Wicked. Wicked's coming out. The musical, or yes, the musical based off of the book that was turned to a Broadway play that is now a movie. Okay, there was a book that is based off of, and apparently I haven't actually read it, but I'm told that it's got a lot of scenes. It's got some, it's pretty horny. That's according to the TikTokers. Horny book. But they're like, imagine the influx of parents buying their kids the Wicked book because it's a movie right now and the exposure you get. But yeah, I mean, I remember when I was 8 years old, I grabbed a random book off of the grocery store, book section as a romance book, and the my mom just bought it without really thinking. I didn't think anything of it. It read like it was a suspense novel, and then I read it in the first chapter. It was very suggestive, right? So I guess at some point you can't help but stumble upon it, but there's a degree of care that you should at least apply as a parent to the types of books that are available.
I mean, man, I watched Wild Things at an inappropriately young age. Titanic was my favorite movie when I was 8. I feel like that's not super sexual, but yeah, I feel like as millennials, we were definitely exposed to a lot more R-rated movies in general. I feel like parents are a lot better about that these days. Maybe I'm just giving people the benefit of the doubt, but the parents that I work with are really good about kind of filtering what they allow their kids to see and read. But I don't think everyone is informed enough to know, right? Like, hey, this is a cute Broadway play. Let's read this book. So yeah, that exposure is possible, which is once again the importance of content warnings and trigger warnings. Like, parents, please check that page out. Look at reviews, Google the book before you let your kid read it. I think that goes a long way, a little bit of research.
You've done sensitivity and beta reading for authors. Can you provide some insights on how you approach that and advice you've given relating to spicy scenes?
I was honored to do a beta read for an amazing author. I can't wait for your book to be published. Um, I'm just so excited to like have that on my resume that I beta read for you. I don't really think I gave a lot of feedback to your spicy scenes.
Yeah, my
Um,
book didn't really get very, it's like standard spice, maybe not to somebody. No.
Yours was perfect because there was like a little bit of a love. I'm not going to spoil any of that because that's not out yet. But I will talk about the sensitivity read that I did for Jess Jeffries. Oh, it was so cool. She has a series of books. They're like a series, but they can also be read as a standalone. And it was really cool to be able to give feedback to some of the sexual scenes and be like, hey, this escalated a little bit quickly. This dialogue didn't really fit with the vibe. And she was so much fun to work with. She was really open to feedback. I got a signed copy of the book with a bunch of little regalia. I got like bookmarks and a recipe for cocoa. If you haven't looked into her, Bumping Into You is the book that I sensitivity read, and she is a great author. It's a very sweet, like rom-com, minimal spice book. It's a really sweet read. It's a good book. She's a great author. That was a lot of fun.
That's awesome. Do you want to do more in the future?
I do, and it's actually on my bucket list. We've talked about this a lot, is to write a book. And I have too many options in my head. I don't know if I want to do like a full-on fiction or a based on a true story autobiography, but kind of change some of the details to protect myself and others from all my former life.
That's fair. That's fair. Okay, now I have some listener questions. This is always exciting. Okay, so what draws you to reading this content?
I mean, the biggest thing for me is it's fun. It's an escape. I deal with a lot of heavy trauma in my day to day. I love my job. I'm obsessed with my clients, and I hold a lot of space for some very big feelings throughout the day. So being able to go home once I put the kids to bed and like go on an adventure and go through this roller coaster of feelings, I feel like that's a very healthy way to wind down at the end of the day. It's fun. As I shared earlier, it's been very healing for me on my sexual journey. And I mean, it's healthier than watching TV or like doom scrolling on your phone. You know what I mean? I feel like today people they watch TV, they watch movies, and they scroll on social media. And reading smut, in my professional opinion, is so much healthier than social media or like the news, you know? So yeah, I'd much rather read about going on an adventure and falling in love and doing that before I go to bed than all of the things that the man wants you to see on social media or the news. So
All
yeah.
right, all right. Do people read smut that aligns with sexual stuff that they want to do or not? And I feel like we touched on this a little, but yeah, what do you think of that question?
I feel like once again, it's a yes and no, right? I do
Mhm.
feel like there are certain tropes that people are more attracted to. That doesn't necessarily, well, I mean, and like shifter romances, right? That's a very, very common genre. But I don't think anyone's out there looking for people who turn into giant wolves to fall in love with, right? I think it's
Yeah.
more the idea of like the fated mates, it's the romance, and then the magic just adds a little bit of fun. Enemies to lovers, that's just fun because everybody wants what they can't have, right? And that just feeds into the slow burn,
Mhm.
which is like the organic part of like falling in love, right? Where it's like, do I like them? Do I not? Do they like me? Do they not? And then like in everyone's dating journey, there's these ups and downs, and getting to relive that in a story can be really fun. You know, like
Mhm.
I've been married for a long time, and so I'm not dating anytime ever again. And so getting to experience those highs and lows and all those little energetic fluctuations of joy are it's fun to experience.
Mhm. All right. Is there a correlation between the rise in popularity of smut and the decline of dating apps? So first of all, I didn't know there was a decline in dating apps. I thought everyone was dating through the apps.
I missed the generation of dating apps. I have a lot of
Me too.
them, and I don't envy them. I feel like it's you're missing out on exactly what we're talking about, right? You're missing out on that organic chemistry, that slow burn.
Hmm.
I feel like people can present one way over text or in an app and then be completely different in person. And so I think the decline in dating apps probably has more to do with us shifting further away from the pandemic, and people are actually like, hey, I miss meeting people face to face.
Hmm.
I can see a correlation with smut, right? Because if you're reading these like true romance adventures, I I find it hard to believe that you're going to find the same kind of excitement and adventure on a dating app than you would like meeting someone in the real world.
That's such a great observation and something. So I also missed the era of the dating apps. So I don't know what that's like. And I remember thinking that there's spontaneity to at least how my husband and I met. We met at a Halloween party. You see him, you're like, I'm attracted to that, and I don't know if he feels the same way. There's, a little bit of, and you're there, and the stakes aren't as high because you're not both put in the room with the expectation of do you want to date this person or not? You know what I mean? So, um, I am unfamiliar with the dating app experience, but my takeaway is it seems like you show up and immediately assessing from the very start. And yeah, I wonder what that is like if you don't really feel that kind of romance the same way.
Yeah. And I mean, I do feel like dating apps have come a long way from what I hear secondhand, right? A lot of them, it's like you meet like you share a little bit of information and then you like go on a first
Mm,
date. It
yeah.
doesn't seem like meeting someone through a friend and being friends first. I don't know. I feel like, but not to diss dating apps because I do know
Mhm.
people that are happily married and they met on a dating app, and I love that for them.
Yeah.
Um, not my experience. And um I don't know. Yeah, no, I met my husband through a mutual friend. He was her boss. She actually had a crush on him.
Whoops.
And from her, I was trying to do like the have you met Katie? It just didn't work out. And then I set her up with my friend, and me and him became friends. And he actually came with me on a blind date, as like protection in case this person was a weirdo. And then months later, we started dating, and here we are, many.
Aw.
So, yeah, no, I like that we had that journey, and that pre-dating phase is my favorite, where you're so excited, but like, do they like me? Do they not? I don't know. And you're texting, and it's just like you get to re-experience all those feelings in this world of fantasy romance, and it's
Oh,
love.
so true. So true. Okay, last listener question for for smut newbies. How do we start? What are the different subgenres?
That's a good question. I think ACOTAR, A Court of Thorns and Roses, was really the gateway drug for the last couple years of us coming back into the fantasy romance. I do love Sarah J. Maas. She's written some really good series. It was funny. My husband's best friend from high school is actually the one who recommended this book. So I was like, yeah, I haven't read in a while. She's like, read this. And then here we are. Gonna need to send her my rehab bill when I get admitted for my smut addiction.
I remember that you shared a picture, I think, of you starting it, and then I threw some suggestions too because I only dipped my toe a little bit in it, and then boy, did you surpass me. You're the expert.
It's go big or go home. I think Kindle Unlimited, and I think my numbers, I'm already at like almost 200 books this year. Uh,
Wow.
but some of them are really short reads, so
Yeah.
it is unfair. Um, but okay, so what are the different subgenres? I know we kind of covered this a little bit. But there's enemies to lovers, slow burn, shifter romances are always good. I really like the funny spice. So anything by Ivy Asher is hilarious. She's a little unhinged because there's like demons and stuff in some of her books, but she's so flippin' funny. She is hilarious. Krista Street's really good too. She has a lot of shifter romance novels. I mean, I have some like full-on recommendations of my favorites if you would like.
Sure. Yeah. What are your top three? Your most favorites?
I don't know if I can, okay, I don't know if I can narrow it down to three. The Guild series by Raven Kennedy. That one's really popular and it's so, so good. Janine O'Reilly, she's an amazing author. She's on the spectrum too, and she wrote How Does It Feel? I can't wait for the third book to come out. I think the second one was What Did You Do or something like that. So good. She's hilarious. If you want spicy pirates,
Oh,
Sea Ruin is really good by Pam Godwin. Let's see. I'm giving more than three. I'm so sorry. Trial of the Sun Queen. That's a good one. Blood and Steel by Helen. I can't pronounce her last name. Sure. I'm so sorry, Helen, if you're saying this that I can't pronounce your name, but your book is very good. Um, and then yeah, anything by Sarah J. Maas. Crescent City is really good. Uh, Throne of Glass. Ooh, and the Fae Fever series. That one's like a 16 book series and it is great. And I cannot remember the author right now, but that was also one of my original, like, I'm diving into this and I am committed. Um, so yeah.
okay. Thank
And then
you. I appreciate it.
you want to dive into the really spicy, like kind of unhinged stuff. Den of Vipers is a popular one.
Well, okay. Out of all the books and titles that you've read, thinking tropes, and to me, I'm thinking like only one bed. What is your favorite? What is your this favorite? Like you read it and you're like, yes, no matter what it is.
That is my favorite. They're walking up to an inn and there's only one bed. I do love that. I do love that so much. Um, oh my gosh, this is tough. Really, I can't narrow it down to like a very specific thing, but I want it to last. I like a slow burn. I really
Hmm.
feel like my coworkers give me a lot of shit for like reading all these spicy books, but really like my favorite books, they don't even bang until book three.
Wow, that's commitment.
Oh, but I love the energy. I love the build up. And then I want the universe just cock blocking them left and right. Like I want there to be miscommunication and I want them to work through it. So I feel like there's a lot of healing components to that. But also, like in the books where everyone's happily mated and they're happily banging, I'm like, okay, the story's done. I'm bored. Like I need it to keep going. So the
That's right.
best authors know how to do a cliffhanger right at the end where they're like separated. And I'm like, no. But then, ooh, that's tough when the series isn't complete. And then you have to wait 9 months for the next one to come out. And I've
Mm.
already read 60 books between then. And I'm like, I got to reread, you
Yeah,
know?
you forget, kind of. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so then that's a good question. So we have writers that listen in as well. And so when they're trying to create stakes or the thing that keeps people hanging on the most, it's not necessarily about the sex acts. It's about what would you say it's about? What keeps you hanging on?
It's about the buildup. It really is. Like you have to be deeply invested in that sexual chemistry. You know what I mean? It's the in between the lines moments. It's where they're like making eye contact or she can feel him staring at her from the across the room or the energy is palpable. Like you want
Mhm.
to book, you're getting the fanny flutters where you were excited by this and it's not just like a wham bam thank you ma'am. Like it really has to be like a genuine oh my gosh, what was that? Yeah, I think it was the Helen Shearer book, Blood and Steel. She did such a good job because they couldn't bang for various reasons. So they had all of these other things they were trying with like his shadows or whatever. And it was so sexy. But we want that sexual tension to build and build and build. And yeah, that's the biggest thing. You want the readers to be really invested in not just their romance, but their sexual chemistry.
Fantastic. Wendy, before we close out, do you have anything else you'd like to add that we didn't touch on?
Oh my goodness. I don't know. I think if you haven't read in a while, it's worth a shot. I work with a lot of people with depression. I think since the pandemic, a lot of people have experienced depression, and a piece of that can look like having trouble getting out of bed, bad hygiene, rotting, doom scrolling, right? And if you want a way to get outside of your head and motivate yourself, reading can be a really good start. It can help with so many different diagnoses and so many different conditions. It can help with social anxiety. It can help you connect to different communities. Like, I really just want to reiterate, even if you're not reading like spicy romance, but like pick up a book. It is fun. If you're not super into reading, if it's hard for you to read, there's so many Audible books now. Like audiobooks are a thing. My best friend, her budget and I have a fun back and forth because I'm like a reader and she's an audiobook reader and we read the same things, but it's like it's different, but it's the same.
Yeah.
I don't know, man. Check it out. Check it out. What have you got to lose, right? And if you're having a lot of drama in your life, this might be a really healthy way for you to read about someone else's drama so you stop creating drama of your own.
Is there a point where this healthy avenue can become unhealthy? And if that's the case, what are the signs and how can you cope?
I mean, anything can be addictive. And as I've shared, I've read an unreasonable amount of books over the last couple of years. But to me, it's like I work, I'm with my kids, and then I read in bed. And I just happen to be a fast reader. And if I'm like homesick or something, I'll read all day, right? Or if I get a cancellation, I have my Kindle and I'll read. So yes, if you feel like you are dealing with a reading addiction, um, talk to me. Uh, but no, in all seriousness, if someone does feel like these books are leading them into some risky behaviors, some impulsive behaviors, or someone they know is impressionable, young, they're reading some books that are really not appropriate for their level of development or maturity, um, talk to someone, talk to them, talk to an adult, talk to a trusted friend. Like if you feel like you're struggling with some urges or compulsions that have come from some of these books, because people are impressionable, right? Like you and I mean, we're like full grown, married with children, right? So I feel like for us, it may be a little different than someone who's like 18 and like exploring their sexual journey, who might think that things like hunting Adeline are like what a partner is supposed to be doing. It's not what they're supposed. Well, I mean, he does do a lot of good things with like, if you haven't read the book, but there's like some like lines that get crossed in a lot of these books. And as long as there is consent and open dialogue with your partner, you can do whatever you want, really. But if you are feeling concerned or have concerns for someone else, there is help out there. Doesn't just have to be therapy. There's a huge online community. Talk to your friends, talk to your teacher, talk to a parent, talk to a safe person. And if you don't have a safe person, you can find Vickie or I, and you can talk to us, and we will happily talk to you.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Wendy. I'm really happy that you're able to join me on Speculative Sandbox today. Do you have any pu public platforms or anything to share? Or you want to point them in any particular direction or any last word of advice?
No, I don't really want to throw my group practice under the bus and affiliate them with my smut. So if you really want to know where I look, you can look me up. Where I work, you can look me up. Um, I'm on Vickie's Instagram personally. It's private, but if you want to add me, I will happily accept your follow request. So no, I don't have any public platforms myself, but I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to share that. I'm just happy I got to do this with you. This was my very first podcast, everyone. Yay!
Ooh, very exciting. And you did a great job. Thank you so much. I feel honored to be your first. I broke
I'm
your podcast cherry.
You did. You did. How perfect for this topic too.
All right. Thanks, everybody, and I will see you next week. Bye.